Welcome to this week's edition of Coach Prep. Coach Don and I are here in the Cherokee Batting Range podcast studio getting ready for episode number 243. We're going to talk about making sure we're constantly reevaluating our players and making decisions based on where they really are now instead of maybe where they used to be. But before we do that, let's talk about our sponsors. First, the Anderson Bat Company. Everything Fast Pitch is very proud to have Anderson Bat Company as our presenting sponsor. Anderson Bat Company is using the latest and greatest bat technology to corner the market in the fast pitch world. They have the -9 Rocket Tech, the -10 Carbon, and the -11 Carbon Light. Anderson Bat Company is using this technology to put a high-performing bat in the hands of hitters that really know the difference between a good bat and a great bat. We're also working with Anderson to provide a discount for all of our listeners. Go to the Anderson Bat Company website and order your bats. Use the EFP20 discount, which is for everything fast pitch, and you'll get a 20% discount. And make sure you take advantage of that EFP20. It's a great way for you to save that additional 20% and then also support the podcast at the same time. Also, let's talk about supporting the podcast directly by becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/everythingfastpitch. It's $5, $10, or $20 a month. We certainly do appreciate the patrons that we have. They've done a great job for us, and we certainly do love the fact that they've kept the podcast alive. We would love more of you to come on board if you can. So again, if you see value in what we're doing, if you're in a position where you can help us, go to patreon.com/everythingfastpitch, and it'll all be explained to you there. So Don, one of the traps I think we fall into as coaches, especially when we have a team of kids that kind of stick with us maybe for multiple years, for a couple of years back to back. And I think it might be more applicable at younger ages, but I think it's true across all ages, is that we have to avoid the trap of thinking just because a player was the shortstop or was the catcher or was our number one pitcher, that they still are today, or that they will be in 6 months, or that they will be in a year. You know, players are always changing. They're constantly developing. Some take a step forward, some take a step back. And I think we have to avoid the trap of thinking, well, Don's our catcher, Torrey's our pitcher, Stan's our shortstop. And we just kind of write those names in, even though just in the last 6 months or the last year or the last 2 years, somebody else has really improved and might be a better fit for that position. Now, it doesn't mean that the players that have played those positions have done anything wrong, but we also have to make sure that we're looking out for the other kids that are doing things right and might have earned the opportunity to move up the ladder or maybe play a different position.
No, I think that's a great point, Torrey, for sure. And just like you're saying, I mean, I'm okay. Well, in my head, I'm playing that out, and it's like, yeah, for sure. Well, they're always my shortstop. They're always my second baseman. But a lot of times when we look at statistics or we look at the opponents that we're playing against, it's like, hey, I need a little bit stronger defense on the right side of the field because they're all lefties, or whatever it might be. And to benefit our team, it might be better for us to swap things up at this point.
Right.
And to your point, especially with the younger ones, I mean, Susie might have been the quickest kid we had, and we need her up the middle somewhere, shortstop, center field, whatever it might be. But now all of a sudden we've got 2 or 3 more kids that are actually quicker than Susie, and it might benefit us to have them in center field,
right,
rather than what my normal fill-in-the-blank routine would be. So I like stats. I like looking at opponents. I like looking at on-base percentages. I like looking at that stuff. And not that always has to dictate or supersede your instincts as a coach, right, but, I like looking at those things. So, there's not just a cookie cutter, this is what our routine is, and that's all we're going to do.
Right. Well, I think part of it can be internal competition. So that's, within the team. So maybe you had a kid who was kind of like your utility player. Well, that utility player might have worked really hard and now has earned the right to be your starting second baseman or your starting third baseman or whatever it might be. So we're going to have some of that. I think we're also going to have to think about the external competition when it's time to replace a player who's left. So let's say you lose 2 kids and it's time to do tryouts and go looking for players to replace the kids that you have. Are we doing it with the mindset of, well, Don's going to be my shortstop no matter what, so I'm going to find somebody to be the new utility player? Or am I really looking for the absolute best player I can? And if that means Don's got to become the utility player because the new player is better, am I really thinking that through? And one of the things from the college perspective, in recruiting, I think college coaches are all pretty much like-minded. They're trying to always find players who are better than who they have. Because if I'm finding players that are better than the ones I have, then I'm always going to have good competition. I'm always going to keep my team improving. But But I'm not so sure that that's the case in the travel ball world. And then obviously in some settings like the rec ball world or the school ball world, you might not really even have that option because, if you're coaching at a high school someplace, you're bound to the kids that are going to be coming across the street from the middle school. That's going to be your pool of kids. And so you might not be able to go out and specifically say, hey, I'm dying to get somebody who's going to be a new whatever it might be. But I think, having that open-mindedness to, as you're looking at putting your team together, to look and evaluate what players are really doing now and making sure that we're keeping up with their development, their growth, and honestly rewarding the efforts and the energy that people put into actually improving themselves. And so, if we stay with the status quo and, Don's always my shortstop and Stan's always my pitcher, that might be great. But if I'm constantly losing other players or holding my team back because I've got other players, that could potentially be better or could contribute more, I got to always be paying attention to that. Because if I'm doing the status quo thing, I might be settling for a whole lot less than is really possible.
Well, and Tori, as you're saying all that too, I'm thinking, on the players' end of things too. If I feel like the coach is constantly evaluating and constantly trying to help our team evolve into whatever that setting is, then I'm not feeling like, oh, I'll just be the shortstop no matter what, right? I love being the shortstop. I want to work hard to be in the shortstop, but if it never changes or, there's not that evaluation piece, then I might settle for, being just okay.
Right. Well, and it might never change, but if
let it be known that,
if we go into it that it's never going to change no matter what, that's the trap that I think we have to avoid.
Right.
And to me, the knowing that I've got to continue to improve, I've got to continue to work hard if I want to keep my starting position, if I want to stay in the same spot in the batting order, whatever it might be, to me, that's a whole lot more motivating than, I'm the shortstop.
We hope that incentive is built in anyway, but we have to, as a coach, kind of inspire it.
And I don't care the most self-motivated, I want to be the very best I can possibly be kid on the planet, still needs that kick in the butt every once in a while to keep looking, to keep working, right? Because even kids that are dedicated and working hard, nature is always the enemy. And human nature is always going to be, but I'm the starting shortstop. How much harder do I really need to work? I'm the number 4 hitter and I'm hitting 400. How much do I really need to work? Well, one of the things that I've been arguing for a long time is that if I'm satisfied with where I'm at, who knows how good I could really be? And, the challenge, I think, for many coaches is how to tap into creating the environment where players are continually pushing themselves. And pushing yourself because you want to see how good you can be is a pretty small percentage of kids. Versus, I think, a much larger percentage of kids who are, I like playing, I like starting, I like playing this position, and I'm going to work hard enough to make sure I keep that spot. And putting a little bit of a fire under those kids to make sure that they're working to keep what they want or to get what they want, I think is always going to pay dividends. And I think we just have to make sure that, this constant evaluation doesn't settle into just a status quo kind of thing where we just keep doing what we're doing because that's what we do. And to make sure that if we're doing something, that the reason is because that's still the best team we can put on the field. That's still the best shortstop. That's still the best center fielder. And that's the best way for our team to be successful.
So in here, Tori, at least for our softball, in the fall, picking teams and playing some fall tournaments and stuff like that, kind of establishing, our group. So what we do in the fall, it might very not well be anything like what we end up doing in June and July, right? So, but only if we do what you're saying and constantly evaluate and share that with the kids. There's a lot of work to be done in between the fall and June and July.
Well, and I think, and one of the things we talked about, especially with younger age kids, 10, 12, 13-year-old kids are changing drastically. Some of them are changing drastically and improving. Some of them are changing drastically
and
not.
Ability. Yeah.
But as they grow, as they mature, they hit puberty, all those different factors are going to be a big thing in our coaching journeys. And we have to make sure that we're paying attention to all that stuff. If my goal is to have the best team I can, to do the best job I can in developing my players, to create the best combination of players that I possibly can, being willing to evaluate and make changes as those changes are warranted is going to be a big part of it. So we want to just make sure that our coaches are thinking about that, because it's real easy to fall into the trap of, well, Sally's my shortstop and Mary's my pitcher and Joni's my center fielder.
I already got it figured out, right?
just for what it's worth. I'm not saying that you're wrong if you're doing that, but if you're doing that, you're limiting how good your team might ultimately really be.
There might be more potential.
Right.
Yep.
So that's going to wrap up number 243. Please make sure you support the Anderson Bat Company and go to patreon.com, become a patron. We would certainly love to have you jump on board and help support us. Again, patreon.com/everythingfastpitch. Go to the fastpitchprep.com website. You can order your Square Cuts training discs there. You also have access to the YouTube channel and the blog post. There's tons and tons of information available on our website. Also, make sure you reach out to us at everythingfastpitch@gmail.com or fastpitchprep@gmail.com with questions, comments, ideas, suggestions, and definitely Player of the Week nominations. So for Coach Don McKinley and our producer Stan Lewis, this is Coach Torrey saying thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again next week.